last time, the transformation which was happening, and we have got to understand to know that, the basic definitions of AI and its use cases and how it will be, used at different levels, and all that understanding of that particular thing has been done basically, right? So, where we are heading and how it is going to be. As we go very deep into this subject, you'll be getting to understand, and you are going to get that conceptual clarity which will be establishing as we move on. Okay, so what we are expecting in day two pretty much is uh, can you see my screen now? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm able to see.
Yeah. So what you'll be expecting right now over here is, what does these things really do? What does, large language models do? What does, really AI means and what it is and all that kind of stuff. Okay. So if you just see, the traditional IT, which is looking over here, which follows, bunch of, rules and everything, because that is what we've been seeing all over the place, right? There are bunch of rules, literally, right? Do
Right.
this, do that, do this, do that kind of a stuff. So let's take an example. Let's say, one guy like Krishna itself, he came near you and he's saying, my CPU utilization is very high for one of the applications, such as an ERP application. So how you will pretty much go ahead and, get that clarity? Can you explain
Okay.
it to me in a traditional way where you have been doing this kind of a stuff? Yeah. So that from now it will be more of a conversational level, so that you'll be understanding the entire gamut around this transformation program, right? So you have the answer on the other end also, if we are utilizing AI enabled IT, how it is going to happen. If you can just tell us, if somebody comes around and just says that, this is the comet, right, which happened. So how would you, resemble it out for yourself? And how would you spot that differences, when your team member is mentioning you this?
Is this is
Any?
related to the performance issue?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yep.
Yeah, but
So,
CP,
hmm.
I was more into the performance, not in the hardware side, but
Yeah, this is a
no.
performance issue. When CPU utilization is very high, that is a
Right.
performance issue itself, which is coming out, literally.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So, the same thing, when you have an AI-enabled knowledge in your
Mm-hmm.
bucket, you can say that, what is the root cause of this? So, why literally any kind of an CPU utilizations will go very high? Because of some level of degradation which happens in the service. I mean, like if some, framework which is written in that ERP, if it is has been degraded, and suddenly over the night, if some framework has been upgraded, and we have noticed it out, literally, right? So this is
Okay.
what literally happens, and that is where you will see the memory leakages which will happen, and how does that application layer is literally running across, right?
If
So
there
that's
is,
good that you are identified it as an performance issue, and little bit if you dig it through, then it would be very useful, literally.
okay, yeah, let's say if there is a data leakage or maybe in the performance, so there is some other tools that they capture, right?
Such as Splunk. Splunk is another tool which will capture that, you know. So according, did you, have that Splunk configured? As we have spoke on the last session, there are governance layers which sit on this particular thing, right? So Splunk
Right.
is such a tool which can identify if there is any kind of a data leakage which is happening, literally, right?
Right.
So you can find it out from there. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, again, understanding that family tree, how does this entire gamut, goes around. The top layer is all that AI, the inside layer is that machine learning, and the deep learning is very deeper, and generative AI, which sits on the top of that, on the deepest level, literally, right? So this is a, traditional way how you are looking into. Basically, in traditional way, if you take any kind of tools such as Splunk or else, IAM or IPAM or any other stuff over there, humans literally write those rules, right? So one of the question which you asked is, I have this data which is getting leaked. Okay, what should I do? That is where your machine learning logic will come. That is where your machine learning engineer will come. He will sit down, he'll understand the data, he will analyze the data, and he will know, what kind of patterns are following into this picture, literally. Okay. And you will get to understand that these are the patterns. If it is a classification pattern, you know how to classify that. And you use the decision tree algorithm, such as random forest algorithm, such as, tree specific algorithm. And there are a bunch of, libraries which can be utilized over here. One is, NumPy is the one of the library, which is a key library to do the calculations of the patterns which are existing over there. So that logics you will be able to implement. Okay. So you understand those patterns and you implement those model level logics over there. If it is a regression problem, how do you do? And that is where you take this model and make that model sit at the core, at the core level. This is at the core level. And you make that
Okay.
sit at the core level so that it knows what exactly is going on. Because in a traditional way, it's all about rules. Rule one, rule two, rule three, rule four. So even those rules has to be get feeded into this machine learning logic. Okay,
Okay.
so that
Yeah.
system understand these rules has been written by the human. Now it is your job to decide what kind of patterns you will give it to me back. Okay,
Okay.
so that
Right.
what kind of risk are you going through when you are identifying something else in an IAM. If something is not configured very well, for example, in AWS cloud, when you are sending out a code into a production stage, and one of your you know software developer, he's pretty much not adhering to the principles of IAM, whatever it is configured. He is just pushing every code into his repository, his personal repository, which has been configured by the organization itself. But that has been identified as a risk, basically. And now you, as an priority, as an IT operations head and the program manager, you take that particular risk and consider that, and you learn those patterns, and you can question up your software engineer, saying that, hey, you know what, from so many number of days, these are the commits which has been getting pushed without your notice or with your notice. So this is a question which you can pose and ask him, and that's where your program management skills will be coming into the picture, and you will identify whether what kind of delays which are going on, and what kind of risk and what kind of trends and what is the root cause, that one of my software engineer is been doing this. So this will help you handle that kind of an issues, and that it will help you identify those kind of issues to resolve them in a correct way, literally. Okay.
Okay. So in this
So
case, we are going to learn the machine learning patterns also, right?
yes, machine learning patterns are very essential to learn. So
Okay.
one of the
Okay.
library, as I mentioned, is the NumPy is the library which you have to go ahead and explore. Okay. So
Okay.
that is the stuff. And again, Scikit is the another one. Once you have your computer ready, while before we complete this session, we'll make sure those are everything is set it up on your laptop so that you can go ahead and take a look at them. Okay. So this is
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
live example of how the deep learning, the machine learning model, when you are getting high volumes of data, if you just see, this is all different kind of data sets, basically, some log, some email track, something, something, something. It will come into that bucket. So this is what the layer, this particular layer, what you are writing is the ingestion layer. Okay. At the enterprise level, this is an ingestion layer. So these are the filters, multi-layered filters. You can create them. So all these filters, you see the small lines, small, small squares, right? So that at an highest level, highest scale, that is your neural network which will get formed. So for that, it requires rigorous amount of training, literally, right? So that is how you, once you throw everything in that particular funnel, it gets classified in such a way and you get that data to get understood in a way that how a human need. Because if I keep telling you, everything right now, hundred of things, you'll get confused. If I take you back again to, regular things, you'll get confused. If we, talk about, movie, give something, something, you get confused. So that is the reason why this, AI will help a person to understand that classification layer. How does that funneling is going on from stage one to stage two, stage three. There are n number of filters which you can create, and that is what you can write it to a model rather than a human does. So in a traditional way, rule number one, for example, if this is a data log, some cube which is coming, right? So this is a data log, let's consider. So rule number one, you will say this data log has to sit in an Amazon S3 bucket, or else, Azure's, intelligent cognitive search bucket somewhere. You write those rules according to the, resource management mapping and all that which you do. So how many rules you will keep writing? You have to write n number of rules. For example, if something comes from the intrusion detection system, right? So how many rules will you write? You will write n number of them. You keep writing, so that there is no space which is left at your space in your own compute or in your own stuff. There is no space left over, right? So that is what happens. So that is what this machine learning will come back again, and it will classify. So if there are any kind of in emails, so it can get classified as a natural language understanding. If there is any kind of an anomaly, or as I mentioned, intrusion detection system, right? So you will get to understand that complex anomalies over there. So this is a classification algorithm, what you are writing over here. And if you want to go in and search anything else, so that is in searching and recommendation algorithm, which you place it over here. So there are bunch of different recommendation algorithms. As I mentioned, DSS is one, decision trees are another one, XBoost is another one, XGBoost is another one. So there are bunch of them. So you can take a look at them, right? So just to give you a glance again, what exactly happens, when you consider this particular image and then you move to this particular image, literally, and you see, how does that translation literally happens at this generative AI scale. Because deep learning is different and generative AI is different. So now over here, backslide, you are classifying. So now you need to write a report. As we have discussed, generative AI can do lot of applications. So it gets created, risk report. So that is the reason why I have requested you to complete that use case. Create an sample, risk report which can be available online. Okay. So that you know how to
Okay.
present that. How does that risk report looks like? Okay. So you
Yeah.
go to ChatGPT, you can just ask, give me an example of sample risk report in cybersecurity or in whatever it is, right? So this will help you understand this particular slide a lot, literally. So now you have different clusterized and different classified data which is available for you. So from here, by taking the help of generative AI processing, which happens over there, you can start writing a report. So please, you know, note down these right now. Okay. In that report, what it will contain at an high level. Okay. Because this
Okay.
report can be practiced at a different organizations, and this report can be utilized at a different organization level. This is a basic, literally. Okay. This is very standardized one. So for any report, as there will be few executive summaries. Okay. And once it is available, then you immediately jump into the risks. What are the risks which you are having in that report? Okay, that you have to showcase. And then once you have that, after risks, because once you have risks in your hand, you should be able to explain those incidents, why these risks has been caused. Okay. And then, if there are hundreds of tools, for example, AWS is one of the, cloud vendorship which you are using, and you're using another vendorship, Azure. You're using another vendorship, from Datadog, you're using another vendorship from Libre. You're using different kind of vendorships. So when you are saying an incident which occurred from AWS, you should be concretely able to say that this has been happened from this vendor supply. And that is the reason why you would need a vendor comparison document. Okay, this is an another report. For the first executive summary, then you get your risks in that executive summary, then you get the incidents, then you have an vendor comparisons. And then now you have the vendor comparison documentation and the report. Then you go ahead and you say that, hey, you know what? This vendor, we are utilizing them at this project level. Okay, and this is the reason why there are these kind of risks. Risk number one, two, three, four. High compute utilization is a risk which has been identified because we are running success factors on this particular cluster. Okay, if you are observing my statements, this is how you narrate them. Okay, on this particular cluster, which is an Oracle Fusion cluster, which we are running, this Oracle Fusion has to not get linked to the AWS. So that is how you bring up a committee of steering notes and you give the status update to your people. And now you go ahead and you say that, hey, since we have identified the vendor, since we have identified the risk, since we have identified the incident which have occurred, then I am going to go and you know submit the steering committee report to the people. So now in the steering committee report, what you will have again in those notes. So because of this, this entire thing which had happened, I will reconsider changing the configuration settings, such as, resource management configuration settings, such as IAM configuration settings, in any, IAM in the sense admin controls, literally. Right. So I'll change them and we will review them now. So in the steering committee, you need to have the review summaries of that particular stuff. Okay. And this is the reason why this incident has been occurred and this narrative which we are using over here. So you will submit this narrative then to the compliance people who are sitting over there as a summary, as all these summaries, executive summaries, reports, risk reports, incident report, vendor comparison documents, and the project status updates, right? And steering committee notes and configurations, what you have did over here, and you take all these security incidents and you narrate this particular thing to your compliance people now. Okay, so now compliance people take this entire evidence which is sitting right in front of them, and they take that and they start creating some SOPs. They start creating some training documents. They start creating some business cases. So now, once you have the business cases, you will go and you will approach it immediately towards your again vendor comparison. If a vendor can do this, it's okay. If he is not able to do that, then you roll out an RFP, literally. And this entire process can be taken care by the generative AI. If there is a generative AI practice which is happening, so all these independent documents which are sitting at your hand on your table, this can be sent out. And immediately those kind of an emails, those kind of narrations, those kind of a stuff can be sent out at a given amount of time. So time to say yes is one of the key KPI which will be used at the organizations to consider this as an evidence and to move forward to create the new business cases. Okay. Yeah. So now as you have seen that, as you have seen these three slides, and now the use case of how generative AI will be utilized. So now we will turn that entire thing into an operational level knowledge hub. So this is where you use one of the framework which is known as RAG. Okay, RAG. Okay, because large language models does not listen to any person in the world. Large language models only listen to one simple framework which is known as RAG. Okay, so when you have this generative AI in the picture, it is going to generate. Okay, so this is generation. Okay, this is retrieval. So over here you see three different things. There are 100 different things which you can pipeline it. Okay, so retrieval you have. This is the retrieval. This is the generation, and this is one thing which you have to argument. Okay, not an argument. When you are sitting with a human being, you don't, get into debate and argument. So what I'm saying is argument. Okay, argumentation is nothing but the translation at a certain end and interpretation at a certain end. So retrieval and generation. So there is a one small framework which sits over here, which is known as argumentation. So that argumentation will be done by an LLM engine. So there are plenty of LLM engines. So Kimi 5.6 is one, GLM is one. There are plenty of them. So any organization can utilize anything. OpenAI is such an LLM engine. Okay, anything. So all these LLM engines will be interlinked towards this generation part and the retrieval part. Okay, that's the reason why you see a cycle of it. Okay, so it starts at this particular system, because all this data which you are seeing, this messy data which you are seeing at an enterprise level, will be generated by the humans. Okay, so now a human goes over there and he says, and summarize the open risks in the IAM program, whatever which is available. So it will summarize, it will get into that particular ticketing system, enterprise policy, service. So this is where it goes, your generation algorithm and everything. So you're all, that one goes over there because it takes this intent. Okay. And these are the entities. Risk is an entity. Okay. IAM is an entity. So this is an intent. Okay, and this is again is an object. Open is an object. So there is a relationship between intent, entity, and an object. So it's not just that easy how we think. Okay, writing a prompt is not about knowing English language. It is about the thinking capacity. Okay, writing a prompt is not a technical skill or anything else which you can get. It is a thinking capacity. Okay, it is a thinking skill which you need to have in the brain. So that is one of the different observation which you can understand. Okay, it comes over the experience, it comes over the period of the time and everything. People think that they go there from online, they ask ChatGPT also, hey, give me 10 prompts to get this problem resolved. No, that's wrong actually. It is a thinking capacity because every person thinks in a different way. There are different kind of frameworks to think also. Okay, standardized human frameworks. There are different, six different frameworks which we, you know, do basically for the humans, right? So that's a different subject to be in. So this particular query, okay, this is not a prompt. As you see, user goes and queries it. Even when you're talking to Chat GPT right now, when you're talking to Claude or any other LLM engine over there, you are querying it. You're not prompting it. Okay, prompt engineering itself is a completely a different subject to understand. People think I'm prompting, but that's not a prompt. Okay, so that's a clear, indication which I'm mentioning right now. So this is a query which goes into that particular system which we have developed, which is known as RAG. Okay. And that goes into your enterprise vault and it finds out and it throws out, hey, you know what? This is what I have retrieved. So it comes to your engine, and that engine literally takes that amalgamation of everything and it generates an approved response. So that is the reason why you see over there thumbs up, thumbs down, feedback, all these kind of stuff. Only you like it, you get it out, and that is what human sees back again. Okay, so this is how it gets an operational at a certain level. So similarly, you can ask lot of other stuff. So that is the reason why, deep learning and generative AI, these two has to be available at your organization, wherever you are, doing. And yeah, okay. So you can work on this. This is an again, an homework which will be given out to you. You can work on these particular things. Okay. And please come back so that the conversation will be more interesting, right? So there are a bunch of other, stuff what we say in our everyday, conversations, literally. So you might have heard about it. It's known as co-pilot. Okay, co-pilot is nothing but a pilot which is sitting right next to you as an assistant. Okay, you have a senior pilot, you have a junior pilot when they are, piloting it out an aeroplane or a jet plane or anything. Pilots does not drive. Pilots operation. They do the operations of the piloting stuff to put an object in a motion. This is the original scientific definition of a pilot. Okay, pilot is not a driver. Okay, so the driving force for an information technology, the IT industry is a different thing, and the co-piloting nature of an IT industry is a different thing. Okay, so that is where you can create your, small assistants and the co-pilots and everything. Okay, so for example, when a developer is writing a code, as I have mentioned, he's pushing it to his company originated his own GitHub profile, right? So you can write a small copilot, security copilot. That is what you will see it on the GitHub. If you are using GitHub, you will see that copilot which is available on the GitHub. Okay, it will be on the right hand side of your screen, a small thing, and on the the third to fourth left. Okay, towards when you're driving towards the left from the settings, it will be at that particular position. Okay, so that it sends back, what are the security threats, what are the investigation alerts, what are the stuff. So you need to write, such a thing. So for that, you will be writing an YAML file saying that, hey, you know what, whenever a guy is pushing this code to the main branch, this is what you have to do. So there will be a small agent, so that is your copilot to review the risk and everything, so that you get all this and you ingest that entire thing into your assistant which is available. So over here, one of the most relevant copilotics, systems in your job descriptions, which you will be seeing is AI program management co-pilots, cyber security operation co-pilots, IAM or, PAM co-pilot, IT operation co-pilot. So they will be looking for these kind of people. Okay. And Saujanya, when you're speaking to the bunch of other people in your sessions and counseling or any other stuff, if they ask, what are my future jobs or any other stuff. So these are few of the future jobs which people can apply for. Okay, AI program management co-pilot systems, cyber
Okay.
security operation co-pilot, vendor evaluation co-pilot systems. Okay, risk and governance co-pilot. So these are the some of the job roles which will be evolving, which will be coming and which will be evolving, and these are the job roles what people will be knowing. And in the job descriptions, these are the most relevant thing which you will be observing. Okay, and for that we would be needing that kind of a mindset. Okay, so that we don't sit down blank in front of those people, right? Literally. So, again, introducing these co-pilots and AI agents into the next level. Okay. So, what happens over here, if you just see, RAG is a system, what we have discussed. That is an operational system, which we have discussed, right? So, what does an AI agent? Basically, it literally runs very autonomously. Okay. And it has to execute its defined work. For example, for IAM, and as you have seen in the early slide, for this particular copilot, you are saying that review the access risk. So its duty is to review those access risks every single time. So similarly, how do you put that? How do you put that in a loop? So it has to read, it has to plan, it has to execute, and it has to notify the person who is sitting over there. So these are not just the tools. These are your additional brains. These are additional co-pilots. So that's the reason why we are calling it as a co-pilot. Okay. It is going to drive with you. So for example, if you are in some meeting, some steering meeting or any other stuff, so your co-pilot will work in that particular defined boundaries. So over here, one of the concepts which will evolve is known as guardrailing. Okay, is an concept. So that's a different concept. We'll discuss, as we keep moving on in this particular sessions. And I please request, let's carry forward these sessions as much as possible. So today we are covering actually, pretty much 2 days of sessions. Okay. And because we haven't seen few of this stuff in the last couple of days, so we are covering 2 days of sessions today. Okay, so these co-pilots will be pretty much, reading your tickets, okay, reviewing the incoming incidents and getting you notified at a different, so notifications can happen on the Slack, can happen on the Telegram, can happen on your WhatsApp, can happen on your Teams or any other different channels, whatever the organization is using. So these are not limitations. Over here you need to understand the operationalization of the different approaches. How does these AI agents are working, how does the RAG will come into the picture and everything. So it reads the incoming incident, it understands the knowledge base. So if you go back, this is your knowledge base what we have built. Okay, the RAG is a knowledge base. Okay, because that works in such a three-step process. So there are again n number of processes which has to happen. But if I keep telling them right now, you'll get completely confused. And that is where you will see a drift which happens in the sessions and everything. Okay, right? Yeah. So these agents, as I mentioned over here on the slide also, those are not just the tools. Okay. They are, enablements for your IT operations, for your operations, what you want to do, for your routine work, what you want to do. So in a cyber security, an agent may collect, alert context, enrich that threat intelligence, prepare incident notes, and suggest the escalation steps for you in the form of a notification, literally. Okay. So, understanding the differences between, AI supported judgment versus, the general AI, what it happens, automation versus AI. So even last time also we were able to, come through this kind of a slide, what is the automation and AI kind of a stuff. So automation is nothing but a repetitive task which keeps happening every single time with a predefined rules. Okay, that is an automation. Just like parrot, a talking parrot which does, only it can talk only one thing. It cannot talk just like an human thing. Okay, AI is a cognition engine which sits over there in a form of an agent, in a form of a co-pilot, in a form of a knowledge base for you to help you to be more productive. Okay, and AI can interpret and understand and analyze and identify those patterns. So identification will happen again by using the machine learning. Okay, and understanding and interpretation and everything will happen by the deep learning. Okay, to support your decisions, to support your steps, whatever you are doing and everything, right? So what happens is, you need automation, you need you know intelligence also. Over here the AI whatever we are speaking of, you need both of them. Okay, so that you get an action. For example, let's say an AI enabled thing, how it is going to happen in an traditional in a way, basically, as we have seen. So let's say you have been going through that CPU utilization thing which is happening in your organization. So for an AI, for a co-pilot, for an system, for a knowledge base which you have built, and we are assuming that knowledge base is built, right? And you will go ahead and you will query the system saying that analyze the text description of an uh, ticket, okay, which has been impacted by the CPU utilization. Because of this CPU utilization, the customer sentiment and the past incidents also might get affected. So please understand that current workload, being understanding what is happening and what is not happening, understand the current workload and recommend whether this ticket should be escalated or not. So this is a beautiful kind of a query. So that is the reason why, prompting is not a technology to learn or anything. Prompting is an thinking process. You need to have that thinking process. So how will you get that thinking process? Only when you have that kind of an experience. Okay. Only when you are making your hands dirty in such a way. So what happens now, when you send this out as a query to the intelligence system, whatever has been created, to your knowledge base, to your copilot, to your agent and all that. So over here, there are bunch of rules in this particular query which you have written. There are bunch of entity, there are bunch of objects, there is bunch of intent inside it. So this automation engine understands what has to be automated first. Okay, he is asking a request. This is a request. So that automation engine gets to that particular predefined rule. Okay, the user is asking a request and he's asking to analyze, he's asking to judge the customer sentiment and everything. Okay, so now I need to go and sit in rule number 58 or rule number 59 or whatever it is. So now this goes to that particular rule analysis, a new automation engine will start executing and start running. Okay, understanding is a different rule which gets executed. So all these rules get pipelined towards this, argumentation engine, that LLM engine, which we have seen in a couple of slides ago, right? So it gets over there and it formulates everything and generates, okay, a powerful judgment, a powerful recommendation engine, which will, give you what can, the program delivery guy can literally do. Okay. So you will see that particular stuff, and that is how powerful you'll know. So that is where you will see the value of an enterprise coming into the picture, and enterprise will see the value of yourself. Flawless execution will happen, and then the judgment support to that complex things will pretty much go in. Okay, and this slide, whatever you are seeing, this is a slide where you can work on pretty much understanding the different layers of where machine learning will be utilized, as we have seen in couple of slides. And as I told you, machine learning does this kind of a stuff, right? Generative AI does this and AI agents does this, right? So this is a very important slide to understand those four different, three different levels at a three different mapping for the machine learning and everything. Applying your understanding will help, and on this you can pretty much work around and give your understanding, what exactly was happening. So you need to able to draft a compliance evidence summary. So this is a work which I have gave in the past. So the same thing I'm requesting again to get it done so that it will help you out. Okay. So, identifying the risk access request in the IAM, identifying the usual login accesses, as we've been discussing that all over this in last 40 minutes, right? So this is what, can be worked on at a different levels. You take a healthcare, you take anything. Okay. And then by this understanding, what will get to know is mapping of you into the different job roles, as we have discussed in the couple minutes ago, right? So again, this is a stack which you have to keep remembering every single time, literally. Okay, your data layer sits down, that is your source of information, that is where your logs comes in, that is where your tickets comes in, that is where your access records comes in, and that is where your policies will be written, that is where your reports will be written. So once you write that any kind of a report, it goes and sits down in that data layer again, right? Because that is the source of information, right? And then on the top of that, you have the model layer, the capability. As we have discussed, you write a classification model for the prediction, you write a summary model, you write a regression model, you write an decision tree model. So you can write whatever the models which you want. So once you have this, that is where you face the application layer. So you feed these models into your applications, such as, co-pilots, dashboards, ERP systems, whatever is that. Okay. Right. So you do all that kind of a stuff, and then you have the governance layer, the access controls which you implement, the control and the safety levels, the audit compliance, the access, validation layer, and everything. So where do people see value? In the business layer, right? So for faster decisions, obviously you need the co-pilots. For faster decisions, people want to explore those dashboards. For faster decisions, you need those chatbots. For faster decisions itself, you need those agents to work for you. Okay, so you have to be very smart enough over here. You have to take the help from the humans as well as the agents, literally. Okay, so you write those agents in such a way, for governance controlling, you write a small agent. Okay, so this is a tech stack which you have to keep remembering every single time, literally. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, okay, cool. So this is a checklist which you have to keep in your hand every single time, knowing that, what you have to do, which data is the right data for your, for your steering committee report, which model is really suitable. And all this we will work on the next stuff, but this is an, high level, checklist, which model will be suited. Okay, for this you need to, take an help of open valves. Actually, that open valves will help you out to understand the suitability of the model. And once that model is suited out, what is that user enablement? What kind of a enablement is an user looking at? If you just, go back, user facing application. Okay. So what is that they are looking forward? What are those limits which you have to understand? And once you see that, these two pretty much fall under the security control and the risk management into your governance layer itself. Okay. So what are those operational governance? So how will you measure that particular, governed value? Who will use it? Okay, and all that you can take this into a picture, right? And that is where you'll generate the business value. And the simple cheat sheet, okay, which you can just take a look at it. Okay, so machine learning, what it does, again, we have seen those patterns, identifying the historical data and all. So you feed those patterns into the deep learning, okay, and those deep learning will handle the complex patterns into multi-layered network. As I've shown you, small lines and everything, those are multi-layered neural networks. So that is a very deepest topic to discuss, but I don't want to get into that. So that is what you'll find out. You'll find out, what are those chaotic operational locks, and what are those usable insights which you can get it off, and all that kind of stuff. Okay. So these are, generative AI. Now it can create that, new net content. The generative AI can create you, summaries, recommendations, and all that. It is your another person who is acting for you, literally. Okay. So that is what you can say, when you send out that query. Okay. So whatever that, models which you will be using, okay, language models. Yeah. And then you have the different kind of RAG, approaches. Okay. So RAG, once you understand what is RAG, then we can go ahead and, get to understand more. Okay, so leaving over here the context of this, for practical exercise, basically to do it, as I have told you, bunch of libraries and everything. So I assume that you get to know what is Python and how you install that Python if you have the Jupyter notebooks or anything else. It's very easy process. Okay, by now, right? So, write a small document which talks about, all these kind of stuff. For example, let's say, when you are, saying, learns from the historical data to identify the pattern. So create a small, system. All you have to do is import, NPA, NumPy as NP or whatever. you want to put it as an ML or anything else. So this is a syntax which you can put it up there, right? So you can start, importing some data sets. You'll get a lot of data sets which are available from Kaggle, okay, for this kind of a task. And you understand, how that machine learning model is able to identify those risks, accesses and all that kind of a stuff, and create such kind of a report, ultimate report which been asked, okay, so that in the next session you will know exactly what is making automation a different thing, what is making an AI agent to think very smarter way than I, and how I am utilizing those models in a smarter way, kind of a stuff. So now you will get to understand, what is that real software engineering and how AI is making a different thing. Since you have already seen those kind of a past roles in your jobs, okay? So hope you have understood, today's cheat sheet and all these kind of stuff, how AI will, dwell into the picture, right? And it will help you out to get this thing done. So please put in your own, thought process, and please put in your own, efforts from now, to get this converted into a transformed stuff, okay? So that, you know you exactly get to that point and you get built that profile what you are expecting to do that, okay? So that's what it is for today. Yeah. So I will, if you want, I can write an email for you also, remembering this is what has to be submitted back, okay? So, as we have learned today, a family of capabilities of deep learning, machine learning, and the RAG, we have understood that concept, and we have got to know understanding about the NumPy, and understanding and connecting those to your experiences in a traditional way, and everything. And now it's time for you to convert that into a transformed leadership, literally. Okay. So, yeah, I will take a halt over here. Yeah. If any of you three members have any questions, I'm up for taking those questions. Okay.